Live. All right, so I want to welcome everybody to our first ever virtual launch party for David Allen Voyles and Tales from the Hearse. So I expect there to be a few bumps along the road, but we're going to have a good time. Got some special guests, and I'll turn it over to David and let him get started.
Oh, there we go. Well, as you said, there will be a few bumps in the road. You can hear my voice. You're looking at Tales from the Hearse, the book. And you're listening now, finally, to the music of Mombi Ullman from his album Witchworks. Very good. So, hey, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yay, happy Halloween, even though it's July 1st.
Sounds good to me.
We are here at the launch party. Wanted to start it off with a little bit of fun. That was a little rough start with the music, but that's the way that's going to go. Hopefully you could hear the music. Could y'all hear music? Did you hear some of Mombi's music? Very good. Okay, right. That was from Witchworks. And we'll be talking about that later. But first, let me introduce the guests that we have. You already heard the voice of Jason Stokes. Jason, quite obvious there, his Halloween role. This is Halloween for all practical purposes for me tonight. That's I like to spread it out anyway. But Jason Stokes is the co-owner, founder, creator of Gestalt Media, who is actually our host tonight. And the branch of Gestalt Media that I'm most aware of and most involved with is, of course, the indie publishing, where he helps small independent artists like myself. So with that, indeed, we invited some other folks in as we're doing this great launch party for Tales from the Hearse. You see down there, Elaine Davis, she's got her Halloween costume on as well. Elaine is a super fan of Gestalt Media, involved in that endeavor. She has helped me. I should have used her a lot more, and I really wish that I had, but I just got to know her a little bit later in the game, but gave me some feedback on Tales from the Hearse. We'll talk about that a little bit later, too, as one of the stories that we have. And Mombi Ullman, whom I've already mentioned, who is behind all the music. And if those of you who also listen to Dark Corners, the stories that we have, and some of the stories from Tales from the Hearse are on Dark Corners. Mombi is the man behind all that music, all that great dark ambient stuff. And it's wonderful. We're going to be hearing some of that, and we're going to be giving away some prizes. So you get a chance to get a couple of books. You can get downloads of those books, downloads of the music, a printed copy or two of either Tales from the Hearse or the 13th Day of Christmas, and even a CD. And we'll talk about that CD later in the evening of Witchworks, which is really just not your ordinary CD. There's something pretty special about all that. So welcome, everybody, and happy Halloween.
Hey, happy Halloween.
It's really here celebrating with me. Let me dip down for my notes. There we go. So as we move into our next little section here, we've got lots of activities that are going to be fun to do. But one of the things I wanted to do, and here'll be another technical glitch, this just in. Voice from beyond just gave me a note there. So we'll get our volume right. We'll get all of our visuals right. This will be a big trick too, but I want to share with you, since this is Halloween, some of the inspiration for the stories here. Halloween has always been a huge thing for me, and anybody that knows the Voyles family knows about Halloween, because we have hosted some parties over the years that are a little bit over the top, not in terms of numbers, but in terms of what we do. We're a little crazy about Halloween. In fact, that's what led actually to the creation of Dark Ride Tours, the Ghost Tour Hearse, where the hearse came into the picture. And I'll be sharing you some images from that. But I wanted to share with you last year's Halloween party, some images from that, because they really did have a special role with Tales from the Hearse. So we're going to try to do that now. I'm going to see if I can get us over to those particular pictures. Oops, let's see. Try again here.
What's life without technical difficulties?
Yes, that's what we love about that, right? Let me see if we can, let me back up so that I can get the right page to show up here, what I want to share with you. There we go. Okay, the first thing that we're going to be looking at here, this is, I had to use the images from an album about the Halloween 2019. You see it says storytelling at the Helton. We turn our home, it magically transforms every Halloween or the Saturday night before Halloween into the Helton Hotel. And Mr. and Mrs. Dark are the hosts of that particular event. And last year, we have a different theme every year. And last year, it was a storytelling theme. So all around, inside the house, outside the house, in the woods, we had scenes set up for our guests. And as you went to each little scene, like this cemetery scene, there was actually a posted laminated piece of paper that had a code so that you could use your phone to access the podcast and listen to the story on your phone while you stood there at that particular scene. So here was the graveyard scene, and one of the stories that were it's in Tales from the Hearse. I did it for this party, and then later decided, this really ought to be in a book. This ought to be in the Tales from the Hearse book, a collection of those. So the story of Graveyard Dare, our guests heard an early version of that story as they stood in this little graveyard. Oops, I did want to show you too. Let me back up on the pictures here just a bit. This little video here will give you a kind of a feel of what that's like, but there was one really neat effect in the graveyard that I wanted you to see. Okay, we have multiple things here. Now, this animated figure here, the skeleton that's on the little crypt, which is something that is significant in the story, was not something that you could just go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Halloween Express or something like that and buy. My son, Josh, built this animated figure, so we're pretty tickled with that. And then as we came over here, as you're going to see, the camera's going to very crazily zero in eventually on not that. See, there's the code where you could, use your phone and get access to the story. But in the background, we have a visitor that shows up in the cemetery. So here, if we look past the tombstones, the tombstones went all down the side of the house here, and beyond the end of the house here, there's a hill that goes up into the woods. Yep, those are the woods. Now we see our ghostly figure materializing in the graveyard there. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see him there. And he'll take a few motions for us here. See if we can.
So what you're saying is you decorate a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Just a little bit. Oh, there we go.
Right.
That's awesome.
So our Grim Reaper then had to make his appearance there. So
Nice.
Will you be doing this again this year? Can I drive down and see it?
yeah, we'll entertain ourselves. This is why I think it's also important. I don't know what's going to happen this year with Halloween. I mean, COVID has become its own huge villain. Definitely trying to be the Grinch of Halloween, stealing it from us. While we were still outside, like I said, we had scenes everywhere. And there was this, it's hard to tell in this particular picture, but there was a tree of souls. And a story or two was kind of connected to this particular tree. But the next little bit here is in daylight. You see the hearse in the background there. I wanted you to be able to see what it really does look like. If you were there that night, you could come up close and under the lighting see it, but it was hard to tell in video. So there is the fake tree of souls.
That's so cool.
You constructed that yourself.
Yeah,
With,
that was one of mine. Josh does all the main things, but this was one of my little projects. And people go, "What did you make it out of? What is that made from?" And it's first it was chicken wire, pool noodles, styrofoam pool noodles, lots of cellophane or plastic sheeting, like when you lay it down to do painting, and you heat gun, you melt it on that, then stain it a few times, put the skulls in, and it made a pretty neat tree stump. So I was kind of pleased. And then now it is actually part of, and I'd like to go, the Haunted Farm is a local haunt at Halloween in Hendersonville, one of the more popular ones. It gets quite a bit of big crowds. Had bad weather last year, but I gave it to them to see if they could use it in some of their props, since there's a lot of outdoor stuff at the haunted farm. Then right there next to the tree, you had to walk through the woods. You didn't have to, but you were invited to go through the woods for a story called The Old Woman in the Woods. And this was, I put a flashlight on, but you had to take your phone flashlight, or we had little finger lights that you could turn on that just gave a little bit of light. You had to walk down this trail. And there were, of course, little visitors along the way. That's lit up a lot more in the picture than it would have been on the trail. You eventually came to this little tunnel here made out of the skulls and whatnot, and had to walk through the little tunnel as you were listening on your phone with earbuds to the story of the old woman in the woods. And I thought that was one of the most effective ones, because there were effects like owls and screeching and so forth that would really make you jump, because you're walking in the woods listening to all this stuff. And they had these figures, of course, in the woods beside you.
Do you have a question, David?
Question, yes.
Would you be willing to make an instructional video on how you make your creepy skull?
Yeah, actually, the skull making is kind of a neat thing. I have a ridiculous amount of milk jugs because the skull, not this particular one that you're seeing, but other skulls that we have here are made from the ones that were in the back up here a minute.
Is that hair?
Yeah, that is straw. Now these are all milk jug skulls, and you can make tons of them. You'll see, I think, a few others in another scene here. That one was just one of those really cheap figures that you get like at Halloween Express. I mean, it all it has is arms, and it has this straw hair and stuff, but in the woods with the green light on it, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then we had these sigils, large and small. We made them position like there was some kind of odd group worshiping who knows what out in the woods as you walk through to get to the old woman in the woods. That was the whole goal, was to try to get to the end of the trail and find out what was going on. Later in the evening, people were given little miniature versions of these shapes, the sigils, and they had to go find a matching one, not that big. They had to find one that was just the same size, something you could pick up, and that was a little task for them, or the spirits would be following them home that night.
Nice.
So, they didn't realize that until they got there, but they had a little motivation. Then you finally get to the pit where there's a huge hole where a tree had fallen, and this is the root where the root ball had been. And there's the old lady in the woods, a little closer view of her. And all those are milk jug skulls. So
You have to show us how to make those. Those are cool.
yeah, they're really not hard to make. Once you do need a heat gun, and you need a really good skull to melt the plastic on, to melt the jug on, and then it's not hard. You stain it, paint it. Oh, now here's the real story of Hansel and Gretel. The little video that you can go there. Of course, Hansel and Gretel were lured in with some treats. Nice little cookies. We'll show you those in a minute. This video is really poor quality because it's so hard to shoot anything at night. But with the natural lighting, but you can see there's the oven unfortunately, this is the true story of Hansel and Gretel. So the real story.
So how do you choose which kids to sacrifice in the oven each year?
Yeah, it's all matters of behavior. So, kids are being unattended,
What's really creepy is I can attest that these decorations are for the large part still up in April and May.
Yeah, we live with these.
Like they don't come down.
Why? Yeah, why would you do that? Okay, they're the wonderful treats,
Nice. Yum.
There's a shot of the oven. That oven, Josh made that oven. It's great. We actually had people that put their hands on the top of it to go, I just want to see if it's got any heat or not. It's really just styrofoam in front of another. It's actually a storage thing that I use for, outside tools and whatnot. So it's just one side and the front and a top. And then this really cool stuff inside to show our burning things. That's another milk jug skull didn't need much of a torso, but it was a corpse that we had used before and stuck him in the oven. Here's our witch. So she's nice. She has, you might notice, some perhaps familial ties to Freddy Krueger.
Oh.
Giving away a few secrets there. There's the oven again. But it gives you a little bit back. There was the metal stovepipe on top. So No,
And you did a Dark Corners episode of.
Yes, that's exactly right. I'm glad. Thanks for reminding me of that. That story is not in Tales from the Hearse, but it is on Dark Corners, and so you can hear that that tale there. Now, when you went inside the house, this was actually upstairs, and actually it's in the loft where I'm sitting right now, where I do all my night working. But there's a story of an extravaganza of a lifetime, which is in Tales from the Hearse. And so that scene started here, but you first saw this little sign about really you need to help people go the right way once they came up the stairs. There's a little video effect that Josh made, my son made of see this little creepy clown skeletal hand luring you in, which is why the sign is saying don't do it, don't go there.
No, thank you.
No problem there, right? Yeah. So they were supposed to come over this way toward away from the door and over the other part of the loft where the main action was, where they could listen to the stories, where these two guys were waiting for them. So I got to write for a month with these two guys sitting with me. This was my setting, a computer. My desk is over here where I'm writing. I have another one over here where I do the recording, but that sat right here with these two guys. So they were quite friendly. Downstairs, we had there's a story that's also on Dark Corners. You can listen to it. It is not in Tales from the Hearse, called Dead Man's Hand, where Death decides he might have had enough. The Grim Reapers had enough of that job, and so they're going to pick a new one, and they're using card game to play to decide who will be the next Grim Reaper. So there's their little set for that.
That's awesome.
This scene I thought was, I wish the pictures could do this justice, and they don't. That is a door to a bedroom, and there's the door handle right there. This is a burning room, and those were projected flames. It really looked like a burning room. And see the embers in the door here, where that's just done so well. Josh really he worked it with lighting and whatnot, and put foam on top of that to make it glow, so it really had the effect of embers still burning. This eerie figure back here, I'm not going to tell you much about because it might spoil the story. But again, summoning the dead. It is not in Tales from the Hearse, but it is going to be probably a story on Dark Corners, but it has not been put on there yet. So you have something to look forward to there. I didn't include it, and wait a minute, maybe it is. Actually, I made 2 slideshows. Oh, here's a little video. I don't know if you can tell. That's a Ouija board. In the story, these girls were doing a sleepover, and they decided to play with the Ouija board.
Nothing good has ever come from playing with a Ouija board.
Not my experience.
You see the little planchette is moving around on its own right there. So video, again, not showing it well. You can kind of see, though, that the glowing of the effects of the fire, indirect lighting from that, but anyway, pretty cool. Here is our story. Again, the open crypt is a story in Tales from the Hearse, and so we had this scene of inspiration here. The still frame here is pretty nice. That's an actual stained glass window that Anna Ray would appreciate.
Yes, she would.
The stained glass maker herself. She did not make this one, but it's one that came from a church. My grandfather was a minister, and when the church, for some reason, they renovated, they took out stained glass windows of the church. They gave this one to my mother because it has her name and her father's name in the stained glass at the bottom. And so I got to inherit that stained glass window, and I don't know if he's happy that it's being used in Halloween, but you make do with what you have. There it is. So nice. Definitely using, I didn't give you much time to look at that, but just kind of these still frames there. And then, look at the wall behind the figure here on the crypt. It's
it was very Nightmare on Elm Street there, kind of.
That reminds me of The Frighteners, which I actually thought was one of the better modern-ish ghost movies.
That poster for The Frighteners was kind of like that.
That's exactly right. I'd forgotten about that. And then this is still frame, and this guy actually moves too. That was sort of there was some activity there behind him. He'd come out and leer at you from one of the holes in the wall.
Yeah.
So that was, we use some things. Not everything is in the story. You'll have to read the story yourself to see the tie-ins with this particular one. There's one interesting figure that lurked in the crypt. Okay, so we'll close that one out and come back here, and I will come back home.
Welcome. All right.
Yeah.
Now I'm
So
gonna.
yeah, I don't know when we'll get to see that, but I'm dying to see your house, your Halloween exhibit live. I
Yeah,
used to work at one several years back, but I think what you put on is monumental effort.
it is really fun. It is kind of crazy, but we've had a dark carnival. Like Ray Bradbury was an inspiration for me from the very beginning with Something Wicked This Way Comes. So that's why my wife and I are Mr. and Mrs. Dark. No matter what the theme is, we're Mr. and Mrs. Dark. And we host it. But sometimes the carnival does come on Halloween. Every few years, several years, we'll have that. But otherwise, we've had a puppet year. We've had, oh gosh, I can't think of all the themes. We're going to revisit the puppet thing because I love puppets. I think they can be
Me
really
too. Yeah. I'm all about
But I was going to ask you guys about if you had, Halloween, if you like dark, creepy stuff, Halloween's just, a fun holiday. And if you had any brief stories of special Halloweens that stood out in your minds, especially as a child, but they don't have to be child stories, but anybody have a Halloween event that's just always stuck with you?
Not necessarily. I dressed like Pee Wee Herman for a few Halloweens.
And just stayed out of the movie theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit scarier if you actually go to them. So, I have a Halloween I can't remember from our fellow friend Jackie Castle, writer and member of our group here.
So I'm trusting that was not a childhood memory.
No. Actually, a childhood memory was, there's always an argument about who it was, but my parents were super into Halloween. So my mother would dress up every year, and she had the same character, this vampire character. And since we never recognized her when we went to the haunted house, so at like 5 or 6 years old, I was getting traumatized by my own parents, like dressed up as monsters. And so we could never decide who it was that like screamed and ran away, but I say it was my brother. But then the next morning, all the fake blood would be all over the sink, from cleaning up from that. So I kind of stuck for a little while, I think.
Yeah, I can see where that would happen.
Totally.
Yeah.
So my family would do, when I was really little, they would do matching costumes, and my mom would make all of them. I just have my younger brother. We're 3 years apart, and my mom made us like a family of witches and wizards. So my dad's costume, he was the wizard of the family, and his was like intricately beaded all up the back, like squirrels and starbursts, and it was amazing.
Neat.
And then he had a big long beard, and he found like a really cool walking stick. And then they made me a witch, and my memory from it, of course, I've seen pictures from it, but my memory from it was seeing my face in the mirror because they put me in green makeup with the little fake pointy nose, and I was not happy about it, and I cried. And so they took it off, and then everybody all night long kept telling me I was the cutest witch at the party.
Oh, no.
So, but that was like when we would do the Halloween parties and have the neighbors over and stuff like that. So that was super dupes fun. And I think I sent Jason a picture. I don't know if you can see
Oh, that's right. You did I did see that picture, and I don't have it pulled up here. I wish that was that year.
Yeah.
Jason may be able to find it. He can maybe share that too, and we'll do that. That's interesting. I asked you this question, and as much as I've loved Halloween, one of the oddest things to me about myself and Halloween is that I don't really have many memories of Halloween as a child. I know I went trick-or-treating and all that, but I don't have specific memories until I was, just very vague memories of buying those really cheap costumes that you got at the drugstore at Woolworths. And often they were so thin that it could be cold. So then your parents would make you wear a jacket on top of it and ruin the whole effect. And then later being old enough where you went out with friends in like junior high age where you get in trouble and do the stuff you really weren't supposed to be doing. And I didn't do a whole lot of that, but I have very few specific memories. But I wanted to have a Halloween story. So I wrote a Halloween story that I want to share with you this evening, called That Halloween Night. But I want you to understand it really isn't me. This isn't my memory. It was just, a pretend memory. And I'll share with you a little bit later the influence of that. And this is not the whole story. This is just an excerpt from that story. And I'm going to see if I can't get some of Mombi's music again. So we're going to give that another shot and try to see if I can get that. So if y'all just talk amongst yourselves, and I'll see if I can come get
Sure.
Get that loaded up. I'm going to get his other, let's see what we want here.
Let's see.
What about Halloween? How about that? Okay, this is here we go.
And there's that picture that Lane was talking about.
Oh, good. You did find it. Oh, cool. And I'll look at her, that cutest little witch.
See, I think she was the cutest witch at the party.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
It's amazing what can happen in a few short years. But that's cool.
Right. Well, let us see. Oh, here we go. I believe the mood is being set. I do believe.
We'll see how many technical difficulties we can work through in one.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It'd be the challenge. I bet I can break a record. All right, this story is called That Halloween Night. I knew it was a bad idea from the start. First of all, because Jason Cunningham, sorry about the name, Jason, was a first-class asshole, and anything he thought would be cool was bound to be screwed up. I never would have even considered going trick-or-treating with anybody like him, except it was my first year in Newton, and I didn't know anybody yet. Next is because Boo, yeah, that's really what he was called, but more about that in a minute. Boo was really a nice guy who didn't deserve to be screwed with. And the final reason is because I just had a bad feeling about the Hadley property from the first time I saw it. So let's get the name thing out of the way right off the bat. Boo Radley. Yep, that character from To Kill a Mockingbird. We had our version of him in Newton. I guess every small town does. Unfortunately, the old rundown house on Charlotte Street had been owned by a family named Hadley, not Radley, but that was close enough for the locals. The sole occupant in the house was a guy who was obviously on the autism spectrum, and not that people referred to him that way back then. No, yeah, you got it. They used the R word. So it didn't take much for people to start calling him Boo. I guess I should be happy that people in Newton were literate enough to be aware of the novel. I don't know what happened to the Hadley family, but as far as Newton was concerned, Boo was a 50-something-year-old weirdo living on his own on the edge of town in a pretty creepy house. Now, I'm going to skip a little bit in the story, but the narrator tells about his first encounter with Boo that happens when he was just walking back from school with his friend, Jason Cunningham. And Jason sees Boo raking leaves and yells, "Hey, Boo, you ate any cats lately?" You know, like the character in the novel. And he runs off, and then the narrator feels horrible, but he has to run off too. So that was his first encounter with Boo, but now we'll skip to the second time. The next time I saw Boo, I was by myself. It was a warm Friday night in October, and Mom was working late at the restaurant, so I decided to go for a walk since I was bored and didn't have to worry about school the next day. As I got near the Hadley house, I started to hear a faint, pitiful cry. At first, I thought it was a baby, but as I got closer to Boo's house, it sounded more like a cat, or actually a kitten. It sounded scared, like it was lost or maybe even hurt. There were no streetlights in front of that house, so the only light to see by was what was shining from the quarter moon. Big bushes grew all around the house that made it hard to see exactly where in the shadows the sound was coming from. The cry sounded so urgent, I paused at the gate in the old fence and debated whether to go in the yard myself to see if I could find it. I have to say, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was kind of afraid to go into the yard. I thought briefly about going up and knocking on the front door to tell Boo what I'd heard, but the house was dark. Boo was likely in bed, and I knew he didn't have any reason to feel friendly toward me since that recent incident with Jason. He was likely to think I was playing a joke on him. And like I said, I was a little afraid of him. I peered at the windows along the covered porch, and my heart skipped a beat. Was that dark shadow, Boo, looking out at me? Frozen in my tracks, I heard the cry again, loud and urgent, but now it was coming from the back of the house. I ran around the chain link fence that skirted the property and saw a good place where I could jump into the backyard unseen. Hopping the fence was easy, and I ran to the cover of a large forsythia bush, which I felt would block anyone inside from seeing me. The yard was deep. It ran so far back that I couldn't really make out what lay beyond it. Apparently, the Hadley house bordered woods on undeveloped land. As I stood there listening for the kitten's cry again, my eyes became more adjusted to the dim light. At one time, the yard would likely have been really nice, a garden with a gravel pathway winding around stone bird baths and statues. But now, while the yard was mowed and raked free of fallen leaves, the bushes were overgrown with long, spindly branches that easily resembled monstrous arms in the dim light of the half moon. As I frightened myself further by imagining shapes in the gloom, the mewing of the kitten sounded again, coming from beyond the back fence. The cat was definitely moving away in the darkness, and it all sounded distressed, or it still sounded distressed. So pushing down my fear, I crept slowly to the back of the yard. When I reached the fence, I saw that there were several stone markers almost lost in the dense foliage of the low-growing brush. Tombstones. Holy crap, there were graves in back of Boo Hadley's house, and there I was, tooling around in his backyard just begging to be killed as a trespasser or a vandal. Kitty, I called in a voice that cracked, embarrassed even though no one else was there to hear it. I tried again, softly. Here, kitty, kitty. As I listened for a reply, I heard a distinct rustling in the leaves. No doubt about it, something was moving. Crawling, it sounded like, towards me from the darkness. And then I saw it. Something. No, someone was indeed crawling along the ground toward me. It was pulling itself along, partially raised up on its forearms, putting one arm out in front and then the other, and using its elbows to dig into the soft soil of rotted leaves and twigs. In the darkness, it was hard to make out its face, but the hair seemed matted and stringy, the emaciated face drawn tight with mottled skin. The moonlight reflected bits of cheekbone that poked through the flesh. When it looked up towards me, I saw the eyes were a milky blue-gray, like cataracts on an old blind person. It seemed to be gasping for breath, for its mouth hung open, revealing a splotched tongue behind broken teeth. I was frozen in place right there at the fence. I couldn't budge. I was so terrified. And then a hand clamped down on my shoulder, and I thought I was going to jump out of my skin. Come, said a voice in my ear, and a dark figure grabbed me by the arm and pulled me firmly, but not unkindly, back to the Hadley house. The tall figure held on to me as he opened the back door and gently pushed me inside. He closed the door behind me and, apparently being able to see far better in the darkness of the house than I could, navigated nimbly through a maze of cluttered furniture to eventually seat himself at a wooden table. He turned up the wick of an oil lamp that had been burning very low to throw a soft yellow light on the water-stained walls of an old kitchen. He gestured at the other chair at the table for me to sit, so I did. My name is Morris, he said. His face showed no trace of emotion. Although my heart was still racing so fast, I thought I wouldn't be able to speak. I squeaked out, I'm Frank. Without smiling, he said, no, let me be Frank. I sat dumbfounded, not knowing how to respond, and then he continued, that's a joke. Relieved but still unnerved, I said weakly, oh, yeah, good one. And we're going to end that right there with a little meeting with Boo Radley in his house, and you'll have to hear about much more that happens in that Halloween night.
Nice.
Well, you can tell that there was some inspiration from To Kill a Mockingbird there, and liked having some fun with that. And I wanted that story to have a different ring to it. And one of the things I hope that people realize, like 13th Day of Christmas, the stories all have different styles. And this one was that reminiscent kind of adolescent style that is very different than most of the things I write, I think. But I wanted to give that a try. And since we were really having a kind of a Halloween party, it seemed like we really needed to have a Halloween story. But anyway, that Halloween night is one of the stories and tales from the Hearse, and you can find it there and read the whole thing when you get your own copy of the book. Well, great. Well, that brings us to a pretty significant point here. First of all, I wanted to let you know this is a terrible way to do music, but we had to have some music. And so the music that you were listening to when we started that out happened to come from Mamba Ullman's album, Witch Works. That one was Tasty Humans, his album Tasty Humans. And the song was Distant Trees, I think.
Distant Trees in Motion.
Yeah, Distant Trees in Motion. And that's really neat. There's so much great music, and you need to check out these albums. But they
worked well with the story.
Well, I'm glad that it did on this one. And I wish we had, when you hear Dark Corners, you'll actually hear the music blended in much better than just trying to play it here as we talk over it. But that's really cool. And we were going to again talk about more of the music later on. I think, though, we hopefully have some other folks that are viewing that have joined us in the party. And Jason, do we have people?
Yes, we have several. we have
We
quite the
wanted to
audience.
give away some stuff, and I thought it'd be a really great time to give away something.
All right, so who wants some free stuff? Let's see
Maybe we could do, first of all, a download, and we can let you, because some of the people that are listening may actually already have a book, but we can give a download of either Tales from the Hearse or 13th Day of Christmas, depending on what that person wants. Once Jason has drawn a name and announced it, if you'll just kind of comment and let us know, send us a message about what you would like, a download of either of one of those books. And then we're going to do a second drawing right now, but we'll do one for the books first, if that's okay. So Jason is going to pull up one of our names from one of our active participants tonight.
And it looks like it is Katrina.
So Katrina, if you will comment back for us, that's the name that we see here on our page, and let us know if you would like to get a downloaded copy of either Tales from the Hearse or the 13th Day of Christmas. We will make sure you get it.
Awesome. There you go.
And you can message me if you'd like, David Allen Voyles on Facebook, if you're on Facebook and use that, or you can also direct message us through Twitter, or you can go to Jason's house if you're willing to try that out and knock on the door and see what you can find there. But anyway, contact us and we'll make sure we get that to you one way or another. I thought we'd also do a download of Witch Works, or maybe, excuse me, is that all right? Can we do that? Or Mombi, would you, maybe since we just did Tasty Humans and we were listening to that, are you okay with doing a download of Tasty Humans?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's do that first, since we just listened to that song, and it's got cool music. And while Jason's picking a name, what's the premise behind Tasty Humans, that album?
Oh, nutshell version is it's an alien invasion movie or a soundtrack, but it's the aliens they look a lot like our own flora fauna, and a lot of people mistake that flora fauna for being actual plants, but these things consume human beings, and boy do they love them. And so,
and they are tasty.
Yeah, and exactly. So the album's basically the beginning stages up to the ultimate invasion of the planet Earth, and by the end of it, you can hear the various aliens taking over at a drive-in, and you hear things going off in the background. It was fun. One of my favorite albums.
That's very cool. All of the albums are like soundtracks, and you have to understand about the ambient music and what Mombi creates. There are storylines, even if you can create your own storyline, but there are stories behind the music and behind what you hear that are suggested that are quite powerful. Okay, so we said a lot about that. Jason, who gets to be the recipient of a download of Tasty Humans?
All right, I'm going to throw the screen name up there because I'm not sure how you're supposed to say it, but it looks like Elise or
Elizabeth W., I believe.
Ah, there we go.
Elizabeth W., you are the winner of Tasty Humans. You get the downloaded music and get to hear that wonderful, neat stuff. Congratulations.
So that's really cool. That's a really good album. I've got to hear a lot of it listening to the Dark Corners
Thank you.
podcast, and it's great music, man. It's very atmospheric, and I honestly, we have I won't plug my own stuff here, but we do have something coming out later in the year, and there's a few tracks I'd like to use for that. So,
Yeah, that'd be great. Awesome.
That's great. It does work so well. So yeah, people, you need to. By the way, you can go to Mamba Yulman. You have a Bandcamp.
Yeah,
site.
mombayulman.bandcamp.com. So that's my home, pretty much where I put everything. So yeah.
So you can stream that music and hear it, and then for a very reasonable price, you can download those, and then we'll talk about the CD packages, which are limited. So they're going to be very special collector's items, I believe. These CDs.
Yeah, they're a lot more limited than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah,
no longer there. So.
Oh yeah, there's Elizabeth W. She's a Cary person. She's in Cary as well.
Oh, hey, what's up?
That's perfect. That's wonderful.
It's pretty cool.
So neat.
Yeah.
Well, since we've done that, I did want to move along and move into the Hearse stuff, since it is Tales from the Hearse. And if I can, we'll see if I can get this technology to work for me a little bit and show you some more pictures. I'm not sure if we were just having that problem getting that figured out as we were getting ready to come on at 8 o'clock. So I will get all close to the screen here where I can see with my bifocals. And hopefully while I'm doing that, I'm going to see, let me try.
Oh, yep.
Hi, David.
Bye.
He did that earlier too. We'll be right back. In the meantime, let's make relentless fun of him while he's gone.
Poke.
That's so funny. Probably be back here in a second.
Sorry to have a party without your guest of honor.
I know.
The Hearse, which I think is what he's going to talk about next, it's a 72 Cadillac. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it's a beast. It's a giant, like exactly what you would think. And this tales just of getting that thing to run and keeping it running during the tours is they're priceless in and of themselves, and trying to like make everything seem like it was part of the bit, like when you break down in a graveyard or something like that.
Right.
Was
I really hope to actually see it sometime. Actually get to sit in it.
Back on. Let's see if I'm here. They come on.
Hey, David.
The ghost got me, man. They got me.
We were telling all your secrets.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay.
On at you.
All right. Well, let me see if I can one more time. See if I can get these to share.
I don't know if you can tell,
come back here. Let me see. Okay, I'm gonna see if that'll get to the right place here.
I'm so dedicated to your Halloween theme. I changed the season outside just for you.
Nice. Yeah.
You should, Jason. You should have put the bloody hand one stained glass up there.
Oh hell! I didn't even think about it.
Oh, there we go. Let's see if we can. I'm trying to get a better, larger image of the car here, but our screen. Are you seeing the? Whoops, sorry. Well, we may have to do the small one there anyway. But there is the Hearse. The funny thing about this is the image we used when we started with our business, with our promotion things. The Hearse wasn't ready yet, though. We had bought it. It's a 72 Cadillac Hearse, but it was still being worked on. This isn't really Lenore. We named our Hearse, by the way, Lenore from the Raven, the main name and the character of the Poe story, the Poe poem. But we had to have an image, so we worked with the image that we could find there. And we found this guy, So that's Virgil Nightshade. That's your host and storyteller. I like the name is a combination from Virgil of Dante's Inferno. Virgil was the guide who took him through hell, which seemed like an appropriate name. And Nightshade's from Something Wicked This Way Comes. Jim Nightshade is Ray Bradbury's character of the boy, and I love that name. So Virgil Nightshade. There's another little image of Virgil. Sorry about that. I'm going to try making it big again. Let's see if it'll do it. It just doesn't come off center, does it? So sorry about that. Let's go back and see if we can. No, I shouldn't have tried it. That's what happens, folks. It's live.
Is that like a little skull in the center of your hat? Is it like
That is, and I want to tell you about that hat. I need to get this back so it is not trying to do full scale again, full size, but I can't get it back. Let me try that again. Everything I'm clicking on is not getting it back to that size. A little tech help.
Sorry, I
Speaking of
retired.
skulls, though, that skull that you can see is on the hood of the hearse. It's really cool. And we happen to have a little dusting of snow at that particular point in time. So, have I got anybody in the haunted house here? Sorry, just trying to get it so we can see the other images because I have got this down to where I cannot see.
Does your son do IT also?
Is that what?
Does your son do IT also?
Yes, indeed. Yes, all the I can't. Let's see. Well, I'm spoiling all our pictures. Damn it.
I'd probably just close the window and reopen it. Would do it.
That's the other one. I'm going to close that window out altogether.
Scroll over here. The bottom bar. Scroll over. You hover over it.
Yeah, we're not getting any. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Oh,
There it
man.
is.
One of those standard things. Okay. Hit escape. Yeah. Why not? Okay. There's a nice picture of that anyway. We do get all this extra material that we don't need, but I love this picture. It was one of the Asheville blog people came out to do a tour with us, and they took this photograph. So this is the tech guy that was just here. That was also the driver, also the creator of all the best stuff for our Halloween parties. So
That director.
yes, yeah, absolutely, that's him. So he drove, never said a word. His character is Charon. Now he deserves to have more of that image. When he imagine him being the driver that opens the door for you and tells you to get in the hearse. He doesn't ever tell you anything. He was absolutely quiet. So his name was Charon, like the person who takes you across the river Styx in hell.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, I know.
So that guy, yeah. So that's where his name came from. And there's our beloved three-legged bear, Eileen, and she is there giving us a visit here. And those of you anybody that's subscribed to my newsletter, by the way, is familiar with Eileen because I give updates every 2 weeks, what things are going on, but also bear updates. And Eileen has 3 cubs right now. This picture is several years old, but she has 3 cubs, and she still comes as a regular visitor. And had to share that picture with you. Now, here is an interesting picture of the ghost hearse because Jimi Hendrix was going to the 27 Club. You know about the 27 Club, right? I mean, in general, all those artists who died around the age of 27, like Jimi Hendrix. And there is a club in Asheville called the 27 Club, a wonderful place. I've done a reading before, stood right here in this window and read to a fun crowd from the 13th day of Christmas. So there's Jimmy's favorite place to be with the ghost hearse in the background. There's a little spooky figure there. Again, this was kind of a promo early shot before we had the hearse. This was such a familiar thing that I had to share with you, a familiar thing for Josh and me on our way to go do a tour. And those of you that live in the Asheville area recognize this as the Bowcatcher Gap on I-40. Just as you crest the hill, then the city skyline of Asheville is right over the hill. But we would often get these sunsets on the way to go pick up people for a ghost tour. And there's our little guy, Grimmy, who our dashboard host. And we would pick up people at the Conundrum, which was a neat escape room and bar, speakeasy lounge. And Josh would park right here, and there's a ghostly figure materializing there, waiting for folks to get in. And people of all ages love our hearse. It's adorable. And the little girl, too.
That's cool.
We took our guests to Riverside Cemetery, a historic cemetery in the Asheville area. It's really a gorgeous place. And had quite a few experiences. Then we also took them north of Asheville to see Craggy Prison. We didn't ever get out to the hearse there, but at the church nearby, we could get out and have some experiences as I told stories, get back in and get frightened to death as we saw ghostly images appear. This is what it's like to ride in the hearse with a group on a tour, so you could have that experience. And there's your friendly storyteller. That is not where I sat. I would be sitting more like where you were looking at the picture. I sat on a little stool. There's an L-shaped, the back here, and then the seats ran along just one side. That's a TV screen. And it could stream what was outside live, but we could also project images on it. So when you were looking at the live shot of the graveyard out there, where you had just been standing moments before, and then I get you back in the hearse, through the magic of technology, we could have ghosts appear right there walking at where you had been moments before. And someone took a shot here of me actually telling a story. So that's one of our actual live pictures there from a real tour.
You got to tell us about this hat, man.
Yes, this hat, and it's right behind me. So I'm going to pull that out. And I don't know if Jen Bowen is among our group here listening tonight. She may be. Jen Bowen created and made that hat for me, and I'm going to show it to you live here in just a moment. That now it became Virgil got another hat. I was worried about the weather with this one. It was felt, not just that I felt it, it was made of felt and bones, but I worried about it. So it is now Mr. Dark's hat, and it wasn't previously too for Halloween parties. So Virgil got himself another little bit more weather resistant hat. And there we go. And we're about to exit. This gives you a feel for what entering the hearse is like and what it's like inside. There's the L-shaped seat that I was telling you about. You sit along one side and the back of the hearse. And the screen is over here, the TV screen.
Wow.
And at Christmas, you had to have a nice roaring fire, as we would have all kinds of special treats at Christmas time. And we changed the stories and had a whole different type of event there. This is another shot in Riverside Cemetery and the mausoleum and crypts that are there. This is at the church that we would stop off on the way to Craggy Prison with its ghostly figures. All kinds of nice, creepy stuff happened. And then it's time for us all to exit the hearse. So we leave right there. So
awesome.
Yeah.
No idea.
Back here we are again. So I gave you a little tour, a little ride in the hearse, and hope you enjoyed that. I really do miss it, but it's kind of ironic. Tales from the Hearse, it definitely inspired that, but there's really only one story in the book that I told on the ghost tours, and I changed it. Most of the stories in Tales from the Hearse are a little too dark for what I could tell when I had families riding to Riverside Cemetery or going up to the graveyard. Some of the folks could have handled it. You could tell there were, adult groups for the most part, but we often had families, and so you never knew who you were going to have. So I had to tell stories that would kind of work for everyone. There's Jerem. Hey, Jerem. Jerem definitely was a participant on the tours and many different experiences of getting there. Also 27 Club, we had some special events there, and we had a special group that got to ride there. So thanks, Jerem. Thanks for joining us tonight as well. So we've got those. I wanted to ask you guys a little bit of a question about people sensing ghosts. And we'll have maybe a little bit more of a conversation after I do the reading, but I want to just, as a way of an intro, do you think everybody has the potential to sense spirits, but they either tune it out or for whatever reason have lost that ability? And if those that still do have that, if you believe that they do, and Elaine, yes, you can share a little bit there. Do you think it's a blessing or a curse to have this ability? What do y'all think? Well, we'll save Elaine for just a minute. We'll let everybody else. And Jason, I know you've told some stories too. Mommy, let's pick on you. What do you think about this idea? If you could, and maybe you have had experiences, I don't know, but do you think it would be a blessing or a curse to be able to commune with those who have passed on?
It would depend on whether you could have any kind of a control over it, I would think. If you could kind of not see something there and just kind of ignore if you had that ability, but if things were just always in your face and just around every corner, I don't know, if you grew up like that, it's one thing, you're kind of used to it maybe, but if, it could be a blessing, but if it's something that just you kind of say you develop in your 20s or something, it could be jarring and, might be a curse. It kind of depends on the situation, the person.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And Jason?
Oh, I don't know if you can tell, but that's something I'm very comfortable with. Actually, this is the reason, and we talked about it a minute ago, and I'll just name it. This is the reason I put together Haunted, the True Ghost Stories book, audiobook, is because I think it seems like everybody has a story of something they've seen or something they couldn't explain. And some people, it seems to happen more often. I definitely spent an entire year in an apartment that was highly active beyond being able to deny that something incredibly weird was going on. And there's been several other times. I think the more you open yourself to it, the more you're going to see that sort of thing. So people who are open, or people who want to see that sort of stuff or want to experience that sort of stuff, are probably going to see it more. And people who don't, it kind of turns down the volume on that. So I think anybody could.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. By the way, before we go further, let me mention one thing and just throw it out there. In addition to Haunted, Jason has a book, a novel called Ghost Story, with a character who has to deal probably with that very question and doesn't feel it as a blessing for perhaps a good bit of that, but we'll see and I'm not sure where that's going to go, but that's a wonderful book. You definitely ought to check out Ghost Story by Jason Stokes. Fascinating take on having connections with those who have passed on. And now, Elaine, we've had different book chats and different opportunities in Gestalt Media to talk and share things. So we've asked this question of Elaine before, and she's been very nice to be open about that. But Elaine, you want to share with us your thoughts?
So your initial question was, does everybody have potential? And I think you know what my answer is. Yes, everybody has potential. It's a little bit more not complicated, but there's a little bit more to it than that, I think. So what I'm learning is that it has a lot to do with, like other people have mentioned, openness. It has a lot to do with developing your clairs, but it also has to do with your life path. And until you're aware of your life path, and in some cases, even when you're not aware of your life path, that kind of drives things. So maybe an example I can give would be, my life path is to develop my clairs and to use them. I don't necessarily understand why I'm supposed to do that, but I know that I am supposed to do that. I also know that I am supposed to teach in some capacity. I haven't entirely figured out why or how or when or for what purpose, but and I'm pretty sure they go together, but I'm still figuring that out. Now, on the flip side, I know that also my brother has the capacity, because we've had conversations, and I know for a fact that he's had experiences, and I know that he's like me, but I'm fairly certain that his life path is not the same as mine. Does that make sense? So it's not going to work the same way for him. So just because everybody has the potential doesn't mean, oh, we'll just exercise your clairs and it's going to work exactly the same for everybody. That's not how it works. For your second part of the question, whether it's a blessing or a curse, when I was younger, I used to see it as a curse, because I didn't understand it. There was a lot of fear involved, a lot of anxiety involved, and that pretty much sums it up. Once I started learning about it more, understanding it, and setting boundaries and protecting myself, I absolutely 100% now see it as a blessing. So,
that's cool. So you develop tools in order to be able to cope. And that's kind of what Mommy was getting at. If you were not protected, then it could be a really frightening and scary thing, and therefore not be a blessing. But maybe once you develop that, and
I mean,
it can be.
Constant nightmares, constant anxiety. I mean, just a ball all the time of just, and I never understood why, So once you get past that, and you're able to figure it out and unravel it, and put those really stiff, firm boundaries in place so that you can develop and so that you can work with spirit. It's a totally different ballgame. So it's definitely a blessing now.
That's cool. Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to move us into an area where I want to read a story about a character who has that ability. And you and Elaine was helpful. I sent her the story before I put it in the book, really, or before the manuscript was put together, because I wanted to get some input from someone who was sensitive, a spirit sensitive, to say, because I'm about as spirit sensitive as a brick. So for whatever reason, I don't, it doesn't seem to happen for me. And maybe that's a good thing, since I'm so, look around, might be overwhelming. But so I wanted Elaine's input to say, how goofy or how on target or whatever do you think? So she gave me some valuable feedback, which I appreciate. So anything that's not accurate or comes across wrong, it's not her fault. I have to kind of take the blame for that. But I do want to try to set the mood again. I hope this music thing works. I'm just going to play a little bit. We'll let some of that go, and then I'll turn it down in the midst of the reading. But I want to read to you from a story in Tales from the Hearse that is the only story that has any roots at all in the actual tours that we did when I took people to Riverside Cemetery. There was a tombstone, and I'd take them down to the bottom where it was referred to as the paupers portion, where the poor people who could not afford necessarily have tombstones. There are lots of graves that don't even have tombstones. But this one tombstone was near there, but it actually did have, obviously somebody had put one there, and it had a date, had a name. It's hard to read the whole name, but it did have the name Mary. And I didn't know anything about that, but it inspired me to create a story about somebody who would have this lone tombstone down here in this one place of the graveyard. So I want to share with you that story of Crazy Mary, and I want to set the tone a little bit more, going back to Mombi's album of Witch Works, which we're going to talk about that album because it's really important to us right now. There's a real fun project going on with that. But in the meantime, let me go over to my other board here and my bifocals, and we'll see if I can do this without cutting myself off altogether again and have to come back from the beyond. But here, let's see if I can so we can kind of blend into the music here. Nope, that's not what we want there. We want to get talk to myself, and you guys just kind of have fun. And I'll. Oh, here we go. We're getting ready to get there. Oh yeah, this is going to happen this time. We're going to do it right. We're going to do it right. Okay. The story, as I said, is called Crazy Mary. I probably should have waited until winter for this little adventure, Dina thought as she fought her way through the prickly bushes and vines that tangled themselves around her legs. Sticky hitchhiker seeds covered her jeans, and mosquitoes plagued her. And they made weird noises. And they plagued her in the shaded woods, in spite of the fact that evening was hours away. She paused to slap at a bug on her neck as she glimpsed a large shape nearly hidden by the shadows. There it is. Dina pushed her way through the brambles and stopped before the ruins of a cabin that had clearly been abandoned for many years. Only the stringers for the 3 steps that would have served as access to the small porch remained intact. The boards serving as treads were rotten and broken through. Dina grasped one of the posts that supported the leaning roof that extended over the porch and tested its strength. When it held, she pulled herself up onto the porch and walked cautiously to the open front door of the cabin. The smell of mildew and fungus was evident before she even stuck her head inside the door frame. But since she had come this far, she wanted to see what this old relic on her property contained. As soon as she placed her hand on the gray vertical slats that comprised the cabin door, the image of that same door, but stained a rich, dark brown, filled her mind. A bloody animal hide was tacked crudely on it. Dina had seen raccoon and fox pelts tacked on the sides of cabins many times before, But this did not seem to be either of those animals. Suddenly, a feeling of overwhelming grief flooded through her, and a huge sob burst from her with such force that she collapsed, kneeling on the rotten planks of the porch. She recognized that grief. It was the sorrow that comes from the tragic loss of someone very dear. Realizing that this sorrow was not her own, but rather a result of her empathic nature, Dina fought to control her breathing, and after a few moments had passed, she rose and walked slowly into the small house. Mindful that the rotten floor might give way at any point, Dina surveyed each of the 3 empty rooms. A fireplace was positioned on the east wall of the main room, and a large hole near the opposite corner indicated where a pot-bellied stove once stood. 2 bedrooms filled the back of the cabin, each with a door that led off from the main room, which apparently had served as kitchen and living room. As there were no signs of plumbing, Dina concluded that there was probably a well nearby, and that once there would have been an outhouse as well. The sense of sadness pervaded, so much so that Dina did not stay very long. When the real estate agent had mentioned the cabin, she knew that she would have to find it. The very idea of its existence, in fact, had been a deciding factor in buying the property. But now that she had seen it and felt it, she questioned whether she had made the right call after all. Back in her own house, Dina thought about what she had experienced. As she sliced a cucumber for her salad, another image of someone cutting and preparing plants flashed in her mind. Dina stopped slicing. In her mind's eye, she watched another dark-haired woman cut herbs on a board across her lap. A child plays before her on the wooden floor with a simple doll made of fabric and buttons. The woman smiles sadly as the small girl stands and lurches across the room in a way that suggests an injury, but the child shows no signs of being in pain. The vision changes abruptly. The woman and child are outside in woods that look like those surrounding Dina's house. The woman gathers ginseng with a man whose red hair and fair complexion contrast greatly with her jet black hair and swarthy skin. The scene changes. The little girl from the cabin lists her way through the woods in the same twisted manner Dina had observed before. She seems happy, oblivious to the darkening sky above her. Now she sees through the child's eyes. Lightning flashes and a torrential rain falls. She hears a man and a woman calling "Mary" frantically over and over, and suddenly she slides down a bank and splashes into a stream. Gasping for air, she surfaces, but goes under again. She fights a strong current, bobbing to the surface occasionally to see glimpses of her mother and father, who are also now in the water, fighting their way against the current to reach her. She sees a root on the bank and grips it and manages to pull herself out, where she lies gasping and coughing on the ground as the rain hammers down relentlessly. Finally, the rain lessens and she rises. She looks around desperately in vain for her parents. Panic rushes through her, and she runs along the newly formed stream caused by the sudden downpour, and then she sees them. 2 bodies caught among the roots and vines in the receding waters. A skip in the story. Dina tries to learn something about the property that she's bought from one of the locals who runs a feed and seed store, and they're both loading some plants onto the back of Dina's truck. Dina smiled, enjoying her new friend's bright spirit. Let me ask you something, since you seem familiar with the place I bought. Can you tell me if anything ever happened out there? Brenda's expression grew more serious. What do you mean? You know, just like, well, Dina fished for the right words, finding it difficult to convey the feeling that she'd experienced out at the cabin. Anything in its history that might have been thought of as a big deal? Brenda was silent as she stared at the ground for a moment. Well, yeah, there is, but I feel kind of bad mentioning it. What is it? Dina insisted. A long time ago, there was a murder. Oh my God, Dina said. A murder? On my place? Brenda nodded solemnly. At the cabin? Dina asked. Brenda nodded again. Tell me about it. Okay. Well, people say that there was this crazy old lady who lived out there. Crazy Mary, they called her. She lived alone except for her cat. Some people said she was a witch because she talked to herself and dressed funny. She wore a weird coat made out of the furs of lots of little animals, and they thought she worked spells because she could make potions from plants that seemed magical. They said she cured some people that even the doctor couldn't heal. Sounds like she was an herbalist, a plant witch. Modern medicine could learn a thing or two from those folks. My people know a lot about how to make natural medicines from the earth. Brenda's eyes widened and she nodded in agreement. Well, the story goes that her mother was Cherokee and her father was Scotch-Irish, followed the old Celtic ways. So not Christians, in other words, which makes a lot of people around here uncomfortable. Still does, unfortunately. Can't say we're the most broad-minded community. Brenda shook her head and Dina nodded. Added to that, people also said that Mary had some sort of disability that made her look like a hunchback as she got older. Curvature of the spine. Scoliosis, I bet, Dina said. Brenda shrugged. Might have been. Definitely didn't help her with her witch reputation. Anyway, her parents died when Mary was young, but since they taught her how to live off the land, she fended for herself pretty well. The townspeople talked about her going to live with some other family, but Mary insisted she could live on her own, and since most folks didn't really like her, that was just a win-win for everybody. So she grew up there all on her own, Brenda paused. I hope I'm not talking your ear off. No, not at all, Dina said. I asked for this. Okay, well, here goes. One day, some boys that were hunting squirrels in the woods shot and killed her cat. Oh, God, that's awful, Dina said. That's not the worst part. Knowing that she had this coat made out of animal pelts, they skinned the cat and tacked its hide up on Mary's door where she would find it when she came back from gathering herbs in the woods. Dina shut her eyes and shook her head, remembering the vision she had seen at the cabin and the drowning sense of grief. That's awful. But that doesn't amount to murder, she said. Yeah, I'm getting to that. A short while after that, one of the boys who had been involved with killing Mary's cat went missing. They finally found him. She paused. More or less. What do you mean, more or less? Well, when they went to Mary's cabin to search, they found his skin tacked onto the back of the cabin. His skin? She skinned him? Brenda nodded again. What did they do to Mary? They had a quick trial, but she didn't say anything in her own defense. In fact, she wouldn't talk at all. Never said a word. They found her guilty, of course, and hung her outside the old jail. Dina shuddered and shook her head. I probably shouldn't have told you all that, Brenda said. No, I wanted to know. Seriously, thank you. Dina shook Brenda's hand and walked around to get in her truck. I'm sure you'll be seeing more of me since I got a lot of planting to do. We'll be glad to help you, Brenda said. And as she watched Dina drive off, she wondered what was going through Dina's mind and hoped, in addition to all the plants and supplies, she hadn't just provided fertilizer for the woman's nightmares. There's plenty more to that story, too, but that is the story of Crazy Mary. And I definitely developed it further from the story that I told in the Hearse, and that did get a lot darker than the version I told. It's a pretty dark version in the Hearse, but I will say I could tell that story even with children, even though it had the element with the cat in it. That's pretty bad. And I don't know about you folks, but I'm often a lot more hesitant to write stories about animals being hurt than I am about people.
Yeah, some people you're crossing a line. I mean,
yeah,
you kill people all day. But
I don't care about the people, but don't you dare hurt the cat.
that's right.
there was a study about that. As studies go, chestnuts here.
Yay.
The people actually were less likely to recommend a story where like a dog died or a cat died because they took it more personal.
Yeah. They're really important to us. And I debated about that, but even back when I would tell the story and you could watch people in the Hearse because I was telling the story live and I would have to get to this part and I told it a little differently then, but I would build it up and I'd try to move on past and I'd also have to comfort them and say, but the story is that portion of that story is going to have a happy ending. It's going to be okay. But because people go, oh no. And you're right. I mean, anything that I told, I think that was the worst part that would ever happen in any story. So anyway, well, I hope you enjoy it. Again, that story is obviously one that's in Tales from the Hearse, and hope you guys enjoy it.
How many stories are in Tales from the Hearse?
There are. That's a great question, and I wish I should have brought that up. There are 13 stories.
Oh, yeah, nice.
And there will probably be, and this is volume 1, even though it's the only one in existence, but there are other stories that are lining up, ready to be told. And that I think will be my trademark until there are enough volumes of Tales from the Hearse where we have an omnibus of Tales from the Hearse. And then we can have some derivative of 13, we'll have.
Would it be Tales from the Bus then? Or
Yeah, Tales from the omnibus. That's great. Pun definitely intended.
You're answering.
Thanks for asking that,
David.
What's that?
I said you're answering the questions I had.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, go ahead and address those, because I did want to hear about your thoughts, because I did send those questions that story to you, and I wanted to know about that and see if it captured the feel, since the character of Dina, who is an indigenous person to the United States and has her background, a tribal background, although that didn't come out in this little portion of the story, but she has lots of connections to the earth, but she is spirit sensitive, and I wanted to be very protective of that character for a lot of reasons.
Mhm.
Did that experience seem to ring true?
Oh, sorry.
No, good. That's good.
I'm here. I promise I'm here. Absolutely. You totally nailed it. Well, and when I originally got the story, there wasn't a whole lot that I don't even know if I asked you to change anything, to be honest. I think you nailed it pretty good coming off. I think it was more just I explained why it was authentic to me. And also that even though it was authentic to me, I explained that it may not be authentic to everybody, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody's spirit sensitive abilities are going to present differently. You know what I mean? So if I have a strength in one area, that doesn't mean everybody has that strength. Or just because I see, like when spirit presents to me, it's always in my mind's eye. That doesn't mean that it's always going to be in everybody's mind's eye. Some people might see them, I refer to it as out loud, or they'll see them more like you would see somebody standing next to me. You know what I mean? That's how I refer to it as being out loud. But that doesn't mean that mine is wrong. It doesn't mean that theirs is wrong. So I think it was more, if my feedback was just more in that vein. But the way that you captured her and described how things were working for her was pretty spot on. And I think maybe you changed like a couple of the ways it was worded, maybe.
Oh, well, that's neat to hear, because I have to use my imagination about how that might work and what people have told me and what I've experienced in watching some folks who are spirit sensitive. But Dina first experienced touching the cabin, and she gets a vision, and then it comes to her while she's cutting vegetables, and she sees a similar situation, and then sees it even through the child's view when Mary was a little girl. So those are interesting things to work through.
The example of her touching something, and when she touched the cabin door and she picked up on that, that's an example of psychometry. And it's powered by clairsentience, which is clear knowing.
Oh, wow.
I think one of the viewers or listeners asked what the clairs were. So if I can really quick, is that okay if I just touch on that really fast?
Mhm.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm just going to give like a really quick down and dirty explanation. And by no means am I an expert. So I just want to give that little caveat there. There are many, many other people that are way more knowledgeable about this, and I'm still learning. But down and dirty, the clairs collectively, all together, are basically what people in general refer to as the sixth sense. So if somebody says, "Oh, I just have a sixth sense about this," what they don't realize is that they're using one of their clairs, and they're picking up on something that's outside of, the general 5 senses that we've been taught, by society, your hearing, touching, smelling, all of that kind of stuff. So clair by definition means clear or inner, which means it can be in your mind, directly into your mind. So there's 5 of them. You've got clairaudience, which is hear or inner knowing. Hearing, not knowing, hearing. Clairsentience, which is your clear or inner knowing. Clairvoyance, which is inner seeing. Clairscent, which would be smell. So if you catch a whiff of perfume and there's nobody around you, that would be an example of that. And then clairgustance, which is taste. So if you're just, every once in a great while, I'll randomly taste licorice. I do not, or beer. And I don't understand why or when, and just random, and then it'll completely go away.
Wow.
So I hope that answered the question. Yeah. But
that's really neat, and I hope that you will. When you have a very full life, and so it's hard, I'm sure, to squeeze in time for writing. But I hope that you will write different types of writing, fiction and nonfiction, about this topic, because I think it would be really fascinating to people. You could create characters and then demonstrate this, but you could also, I mean, people would love to hear about it in just straight form like you're teaching right now. So thanks for sharing that. That's actually very helpful and pretty neat. So cool. And I also encourage people, I don't know what folks are with us, but if anybody wants to ask a question and they want to make a comment or they have their own thing, by all means, they should be entering those questions and comments in. But I think we can have a drawing and give away some more stuff. We can give away another book or two, give away some music. So why don't we do a drawing for another download of either the Tales from the Hearse or 13th Day, depending on what that person would like. Jason, can we pull up another name of somebody who might, hopefully they're still with us. And I mean that by online.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this, but if you see your name on screen, you're the winner.
Great. Please contact us with a way that we can give you the download of and let you choose if you'd like to get a copy of ebook version of Tales from the Hearse, and we'll give you the format that will work for you. So please give us a message and we'll get that to you. Congratulations. And maybe one more name for some music, and maybe we could do Witchworks, the CD, which that song that you heard starting off from, which by the way was Dance of the Scarecrows, if I'm not mistaken. I think I did that one right.
That's right.
And it's really cool. The music is so cool on this that I hate that I have to sometimes turn it down and I'm not able to work the volume right on it to do it justice. But maybe someone a lucky winner to download a free copy of Witchworks, 13 songs, if I'm not mistaken, just to kind of go, just coincidental, it kind of goes along.
Funny, yeah.
Did you guys do that on purpose?
Yeah, you got lucky on that one.
All right. And
what is our winner, if we got a name?
Yep, it looks like Emil.
Very good, Emil. You're the lucky winner, and we'll get you a code to use and how you can download Witchworks. Just be sure to contact us and leave that information of what your handle is there, so we can send it to you. Cool, great. Always fun to hear spooky stuff and then win stuff at the same time. I mean, you gotta like that. Mm-hmm. That kind of moves me then into, and I hope we're not taking up too much time. If it's Halloween, you gotta, take the time that you got, right, and go with it. I want to move into a little bit more of the idea of just scary stories, just good old fashioned scary stories. And I don't know if y'all have had a chance, how much of the book you've been able to read, but if you found in Tales from the Hearse, which stories you felt were maybe scarier than others, because there are a lot of different types of stories in there. There's real traditional stories of ghost stories, and there's some maybe a little more humorous, like the that Halloween night. And then I'll tell you what I think, in my opinion, was the one that was scariest to me to write. But I want to hear first if anybody has any ideas about what they thought maybe was a particularly scary story in this book. Anybody have any thoughts along those lines?
Oh man.
So I didn't find any of them. Okay, so let me just finish the whole statement.
Yeah.
I didn't find any of them scary.
Ah,
But I found several of them super suspenseful, and the one that really got to me was I'm not gonna say it right. So fix
oh,
it.
the Bubek.
Yeah, fix it for me. Thank you.
Okay,
Bubak.
and I don't know if I've tried to look at it to see it's Slovakian, so it's got coming from the old country of a neat story, and it happens here in the United States, but there's a family whose background comes from Slovakia, and they have the grandmother who has more roots there, obviously, than the younger generations here in the story, has told them about this character, the Bubek, who is like a scarecrow, but he has a long coat. He's got a terrifying face, but a long coat made of the skins of children that he has collected, which I thought was pretty good. The bad kids. I mean, talk about some incentive to behave. But otherwise a really nice guy. He's a pretty neat guy. So I had to take that idea and go, okay, let's play with the idea of stories and folklore that comes to us from all sorts of different cultures. And we appropriate things in the United States like crazy, but where does that come from? And are there really entities perhaps that different cultures see in different ways? It's the same thing, but we just interpret it in different ways. Or do these entities exist as different forms and then travel with us when we go to another place in the world? So that was kind of a fun idea. I don't think I attempt to answer that question, but it was certainly one that I found intriguing. And so you found that story, you say suspenseful is the word, rather than necessarily scary. What scares you, Elaine? And not necessarily in the book or fiction, but what does scare you?
Honestly,
Hard to say, hard to find something.
like true crime kind of stuff, and probably because of the whole history of domestic violence in my upbringing, past
Right.
and stuff. I think I love monster stories, and I love reading horror stories, and I grew up on Stephen King, so I love all of that kind of stuff. I have a really hard time reading stories where people are just being violent to each other. It's hard for me.
Right.
So watching something like that documentary on Netflix about Ted Bundy, something like that would probably scare you more.
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, I can do it, and my husband watches that kind of stuff, and I get through it. But it's
hard to watch.
hard. It bothers me more than all of the monster stuff. Like, if the options were, hey, do you want to watch a monster movie, or would you like to watch this thing about Ted Bundy? I would go for the monster movie.
Yeah. I definitely have friends that have the same thoughts, and they go, you can watch both, but the thing that actually bothers them are the things that seem more likely to possibly happen to them.
Yeah, people can be really horrible to each other.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Well, I do find them entertaining, but I do find that I can kind of scare myself sometimes. And I put myself in that frame of mind. And I think there are just times when if you are totally by yourself, that's another thing. If I'm with someone, I think I could endure a lot in the supernatural sense. But if I'm by myself in a really creepy place and then something happens, that to me might be more terrifying. So obviously, when I'm writing, I like to put my characters in exactly that situation where that.
Yeah, nighttime when I'm taking out the trash, like it's terrifying. Just going outside by myself.
I know that feeling. Because you can freak yourself out, and if you've got a great imagination, all it takes is stepping out into the dark.
Yeah.
And then a million things can happen. So, well, Jason.
Oh well, you've been up to. We live on a farm.
Yep.
And there's a field that separates my house from my in-laws' house, and it's not the longest field in the world, but the exposure at night is like the scariest thing in the. You can't see. You know that there's nothing but space all around you, but you can't see any of it.
Yeah.
So
creepy.
You can creep yourself out pretty easily trying to walk across that.
Yeah. So have you done those walks by yourself up in there in the woods?
I haven't managed to go. There's miles of trails up there. I haven't managed to do them by myself, but I have ridden the ATV, little four-wheeler through there at night,
Really
And
fast to make it short. I said really fast.
Really fast.
because
Yeah.
I mean, even like that, you know, you can get away real fast, but you feel like something's following you.
It is amazing what you can do, the power of the imagination. Oh yeah, I can relate to what Jason Chestnut's saying here. I've been up there in the rain too. That was daytime though, and you did it at night. But Jason Stokes lives out in the middle of nowhere, some really windy mountain roads, and to do that in the rain at night, that's what Chestnut was just saying. Yes, that is a very frightening.
He's a braver man than me.
Well, the story in Tales from the Hearse that I found that I scared myself with, and that's why I enjoy it a whole lot. It's one of my favorite stories for a long time, is the story Tag. And it starts off, let's see, I have to give a little background. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there was a park there called Freedom Park. And in that park, one of the things that we all played on, there were two things that they played on, an actual train locomotive and an airplane jet. And you couldn't really get in the jet. It was just one of those, only a cockpit, barely enough for one pilot. You could climb on the wings and everything, but you couldn't get in the cockpit, as I recall. But the train engine, the locomotive, you could climb all over that thing. And I'm amazed. I never heard about anybody getting hurt on it. I'm amazed that kids weren't killed all the time playing on that locomotive. So for some reason, that image came to me, and it is something that I wanted to work into a story with kids, about kids, but somebody who's grown up and has a childhood memory of something that terrifies them, that kind of lingers. And that's what the story Tag is all about. And as usual, well, usual meaning this is the third time, I'd like to try to find the song that I want to start with to get a little mood music. This is also going to come from Which Works.
Here we go again. Let's see.
Yeah, man. Here we go. It is going to be, and I'll go ahead and tell you the title of this one too. Oh, shoot. Well, I'm going to go back. You know, here's the song I meant to play when we were doing, it'll work well for both things. For when we're doing the tour, the Hearse photos, there's a song that's really fun in there called No Ordinary Hayride. This is a very Halloween album, by the way. The whole Which Works album's got a lot of Halloween themed things in it. So anyway, here's No Ordinary Hayride. I'm going to start it with that, and then I'll play it, tune it down in a little bit. We phase into it here. Let's play tag. Davy's it. Geordie, the self-appointed leader of the gang, stands and grins at Davy while everyone else takes off running, and then Geordie turns and runs as well. Why does he always pick me? Davy shrugs it off and begins counting to give the guys a fair chance. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5. And Davy starts after Tommy, the heaviest kid in the group, but then realizes that although he could easily tag him, Tommy will never be able to catch anyone else and will remain it forever, and everyone will quickly lose interest in the game. He trots instead towards Steve, who is heading toward the swings on the far side of the park, but he's already too far out of reach. Rand and Jay have climbed up to the enclosed platform atop the rocket ship from which a metal sliding board projects, and thus have made it to one of the safe zones. Yeah, you can't catch me, Jay calls out. Davy slows to a walk and surveys the field. Geordie is watching him from the monkey bars and then looks to the old locomotive that the city park builders had painted and refurbished for kids to play on. Geordie runs for it, and Davy takes off too, calculating the distance even as he runs, thinking that he might have a chance to catch Geordie somewhere on the engine. Geordie reaches the train first and pulls himself up on the handrails as he takes the black metal steps 2 at a time that lead to the cab. Davy reaches the steps as Geordie runs through the framed passage to the front of the engine. Copying Geordie's moves, Davy follows his path through the cab and stomps along the mesh catwalk that runs alongside the boiler, and sees that Geordie's climbing up toward the bell mounted behind the smokestack. My God, it's just like Geordie to ring that bell, showing off how he made it there first. Geordie climbs up onto the hot black cylinder, using various odd parts which protrude from the engine as footholds that millions of kids before him have used to reach the bell. He grips the cable that runs back to the cab and sneers back down at Davy. Seeing that one of Geordie's white high-top Converse sneakers is within reach, Davy grabs it and yanks hard. "Tag, you're it," he yells, and Geordie wrenches his foot free, and since the shoe is untied, Geordie's shoes are always untied, it comes off in Davy's hand even as he hears the bell ring. Being precariously positioned on the engine and his stretch to reach the bell, Geordie loses his balance and falls, his arms flailing. He rolls off the engine and his head smashes against the hard metal railing along the catwalk, making a loud, ringing tone. Geordie lies face down on the catwalk, perfectly still, and something drips onto the gravel below them. Davy hears someone cry out, "Oh my gosh, that guy's bleeding like a stuck pig." And another kid says, "Holy crap, his eye popped out." Gasping for breath, Dave lurched upright in his bed. He gripped the sheets in both fists as he stared wide-eyed around the darkened bedroom. He forced himself to breathe through his nose in order to calm himself and slow his racing heartbeat. The dream had come again. Now, time passes a little bit. Dave's concentration is shot because he can't get a decent night's sleep with the recurring dream of this childhood memory, and it's beginning to show at work. He shrugs off an offer from his friends to go eat lunch and decides he wants to go outdoors to go have lunch in the park, the river park, by himself. The Good Eats food truck sat in its familiar location at the entrance to the greenway. Manuel, the owner and operator, easily spotted Dave as he approached. "Hello, my friend." His teeth shone through his broad smile. "The usual?" "Of course. Can't resist it," Dave said, grinning back. Within 5 minutes, he was holding a pulled pork and pimento cheese sandwich and a large cup of sweet tea to wash it down with as he looked for a good place to eat. "No wonder I have nightmares," he thought to himself, looking at the gooey sandwich, but savoring its sweet smell just the same. An unoccupied picnic table with an unobstructed view of the French Broad River was just a few steps away. A couple in their 20s wearing tight, brightly colored life vests with matching helmets rode by in kayaks. Several kids in designer jeans and expensive sneakers were squealing and chasing each other on a large grassy area. A park for the privileged, Dave thought, but still a great place to unwind. In less than a minute, the sandwich was gone. Guess I was hungrier than I thought. Throwing his trash in a nearby waste can, he chose the sidewalk that took him farther away from his office, sucking noisily on the straw to get to the last bit of the drink as he strolled leisurely along the river. This was the best he had felt in days. Getting out and enjoying the fine summer mountain weather had been the right call. The children he had noticed before were now grouped together on a boarded platform that looked out over the river. Dave smiled as he tried to guess who they had been pretending to be as they performed on their makeshift stage. Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer, maybe? Nah, that's obviously too old and boring for today's kids. More like Harry Potter or Spider-Man. The kids suddenly broke out in squeals and laughter as all but one stampeded off the platform and scattered in different directions. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5. A chill ran up Dave's spine as he recognized the signs of an impromptu game of tag. The girl in a t-shirt with a rainbow-maned unicorn was it, and she was scoping out who to chase first. She charged after a boy wearing a red Chicago Bulls hat, and as she was clearly the better runner, she would definitely catch him. A movement among the trees in the other direction caught Dave's attention. In the shadows was a boy he hadn't noticed earlier, wearing a plain white t-shirt, stiff jeans with a large iron-on patch on one knee, and white, high-top Converse sneakers with laces untied. Geordie. Oh, my God. That's Geordie. The boy walked out from the copse of trees and stood on the paved pathway dappled with sunlight that fell through the thickly leaved boughs. He grinned, and as the sun and shadows danced across the youthful face, for just a moment, The flesh melted away, revealing a smiling skull with a single eye visible in one of the dark sockets. Just as quickly, the image returned to the same grinning Geordie that Dave remembered so well. The boy slowly nodded once, turned, and ran around a bend out of sight. There's plenty more about Geordie and his visits to Dave on the rest of that story called Tag. But I had a lot of fun writing that, freaking myself out with the different scenes, being tormented from something from your past, which is always a fun thing for me to deal with. So frightening, imaginative scenes, well, that's what I like to do at Halloween. That's what our Halloween parties are all about, where all these scenes are, just having fun with that and being entertained with it. And why I write and why it turned into a ghost tour, which then turned into, once the ghost tour ended, writing, continuing it on so I could have Halloween all year round. It's pretty much, I think, the whole reason of doing it. And I think there are a lot of people who kind of share that idea. At least I hope they are, because then maybe they'll buy some books. But that's the idea behind that. But I wanted to move into talking about the music some more, because Mombi and I have been involved in a really special project that I hope other people are tuning into. And if you haven't discovered it yet, I really want you to give it a try. I do have a horror podcast called Dark Corners. I've already talked to you about it some. There's some stories that we had from our Halloween party before that have found their way. The first season of Dark Corners were single standalone stories. But this season, we're trying something different. And I took Mombi's existing album of Witchworks, this wonderful Halloween themed. I mean, to me, it said and screamed Halloween, and Mombi, you confirmed it. Pretty much, it is Halloween.
It's my Halloween album. Oh yeah,
it's Halloween album. I mean, in fact, okay, now set it aside, and now I've hid it from myself. But it's supposed to be. Oh shoot! Oh, here it is. I'll spin around here. Here we go. If I can get that nice black and orange, see if I get the light to not shine on it so much, and get my fingers out of the way. But you can see a lot about that. Mommy, tell us about what goes into making. These are handmade CDs that they open out, and then you've got the neat. Notice the CD itself, like an old 45.
Yeah, they look like old records or something. Yeah, usually there's it's just a little package I put together. Each album or these particular sleeves, I'll put some rope in it and the little enclosure things where it stays shut. And then I utilize a lot of Mod Podge actually. So, I knew if I was going to make CDs, a lot of people don't necessarily collect CDs anymore. So I had to make it really special, a collector's item of some sort.
So, and the other CDs that you have, often they have different things too. Now, this one, for example, there is a storyline to Witchworks that Mombi had already. And so this is the story right here. And I took the idea of that and said, wouldn't it be fun to expand that and into a whole season of Dark Corners, so that every 2 weeks, you'd have another episode of Witchworks. And it's a really cool story set in Maria Bay. I put it in Maria Bay, North Carolina, because everything I like to do, if I can, is in North Carolina. So the fictitious locale of Maria Bay in the coast of North Carolina, where our character has returned after, as a grown-up, coming back to the family farm. But near the farm is a toy factory, an old abandoned toy factory, and there's quite an interesting history attached to this very spooky, very scary toy factory right near the Thompson farm. So I created some new characters, added a little bit to the storyline, but still took the 13 songs that are here are the 13 episodes, the 13 tracks on the CD or the 13 episodes, and they will take us up to the week before Halloween. So that by Wednesday, Halloween's on a Saturday this year. I believe there's a full moon, in fact, on Halloween, if I'm not mistaken. But on the Wednesday, I believe we'll have 2 episodes, episode 12 and 13 together, in order to get them to finish up at Halloween. We'll conclude that story of Witchworks. But this is a wonderful CD. They're all great, but you know, Halloween's really special and dear to my heart. So I wonder, let's do another drawing for Witchworks and a download if we can, then get a winner for somebody to have this. And then we're gonna do a couple of things here. We're gonna do some downloads, and then see if some lucky winner can get these, because there aren't many left. Mamba, you don't have a lot of material to work with, and things are running out, right?
I think I have. I just sold one of them, so I have one more left. So,
so that'll be a very precious thing. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's do a drawing for the actual physical CD, where you can get all the little handy treasures that come with it. Jason, can we've got a name that we can. And this person will have to. They'll have to privately contact us to get a mailing address that we can send the CD to.
So our winner is Pam. Pam Walden is our winner.
Oh, great, Pam. Be sure to contact Jason or me or Mombi, and if we can get your address to mail this to. Actually, if you'll contact me, because I got some of Mombi's CDs, you can keep that one, and I have one to be able to give away myself. Pamela Walden, you are a winner. Contact me, David Allen Voyles, or Jason can do that too. But so we can get the address and send you this in the mail. And I honestly believe these are going to be, they're valuable right now because of the content and how wonderful they are, but because they're going to be kind of limited, and I believe they're actually a very special thing. So congratulations on that. And we can maybe go ahead and offer another e-version, and so you can download that, and we'll give you a code so that you can download that onto your computer or phone and have the whole Witchworks collection as well. One more winner, maybe? Can we have another?
Let's go with Gail Thompson. How about that?
Gail. Okay, Gail, congratulations in Charlotte, North Carolina. You got your very, and these are great Halloween albums. So, I mean, I know Gail's just the Halloween person. I know Gail. No, I'm teasing a little bit, but she is definitely, this is some nice, fun stuff that she can decorate her house and her neighborhood. Gail Thompson, you are the winner of Witchworks. And perhaps what I like to do is give a signed copy of Tales from the Hearse, the book, to a lucky winner if we've still got anybody with us.
You absolutely do. And again, I will not try to pronounce this name.
We'll put this up here. Here's this person. The winner is, it's Tanya.
She is a really good fan of ours, and she is very interested in your work, and you left her on a cliffhanger, so we're going to go ahead and send her the book.
Excellent. That's right. Tanya, just make sure you get us, you can give it to Jason if you want, but get the address so that we can send you a copy of the book. A nice signed copy. Oh, and off he goes, mysteriously disappearing. Oh, he's gonna pull up the copy right now, it looks like. Well, that's exciting to have all those things going on with the music and the CDs, the physical copies of the CDs, the physical copies of the book, and downloaded versions of the book. Well, that's what makes Halloween special. I hope that it has been something that people have enjoyed. I hope it's been fun for people to follow us along on this crazy event here with Halloween on July 1st. But it's fun for me, and I don't know what Halloween's going to be like. I have a feeling that our Halloween themed party this year may have to be a virtual one. That may be something we're going to have to do, and this may have been a dry run to do something along those lines. But I know that I'll have to observe Halloween somehow. But stay tuned, folks, and maybe you'll find out some way that we can do that.
Something virtual would be fun, I think.
Yeah.
A virtual online Halloween party could be a lot of fun. So, yeah, we're going to give that some thought. Everybody has ideas, definitely pitch those in there. But I think what we'll do, I'm going to try to take us out with a little bit of that same music that we had before and put the image back up again, if I can find it, of Tales from the Hearse, so that you can also I should have said all along, we've been talking about it, but if you weren't fortunate enough to win your own copy of Tales from the Hearse, but you'd like to get it, please go to gestaltmedia.com and click on shop. there are lots of wonderful writers besides me, but since we're kind of focused on Halloween right now, we'll do with Tales from the Hearse, but you can get your copy of that there. And Dark Corners is definitely available. You can find it at gestaltmedia.com, and you'll see the podcast button to click on, and you can hear it there. You can also find it on iTunes or on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. So there he is. Did you get a victim?
I got evicted.
Had to take care of that little kid, that pesky little kid that showed up, or campers. I don't know which. But I was telling people about where they could go. They could get to gestaltmedia.com to get a copy of the book, and also to get. Here's a question. Anything special that you do to get into the creative mode before you start working on your projects? Yes. Yeah. What do you do now? Because Mombi, this music, and if you are interested, Mombi and I have done an interview together before too, that you can also find on the Gestalt Media YouTube channel. But what do you do to kind of get yourself in a frame of mind to make this creative, creepy music?
Well, a lot of the cryptid related albums, like Point Pleasant or Race of the Appalachian, which are based on true stories of cryptids or whatever. I will start collecting and reading books on those subjects, and I'll watch documentaries on those things, and it just keeps the ideas coming while I have my fingers on the keyboard. And then with something like Witchworks, honestly, I'd always wanted to do that album pretty much. So all I had to do was watch some John Carpenter movies for like a million times, and I was just on a roll. And it was Halloween. I guess I had my mind in Halloween mode when I was making that. So it was just constant. Yeah.
That's neat. So the storyline came as you were making the music, or did it come first? Or
the story, there were pieces of a story, and it all tied together by the time I was composing the last tracks. I knew I needed this. I needed a track that represented scarecrows jumping in the air and landing on a car and things of that nature. So by the end of it, I was like, yeah, it's about this. And I knew it was always about a toy factory in a small town. That was the main thing. So
that's cool. It is really fun. And I've obviously taken liberties with the story. So it follows the tracks of music, and the suggestion of what was going on in Mombi's story gave me an idea where to go. But they are probably, it's fair to say, two separate stories, but two similar parallel stories.
I love your adaptation, though. It's pretty much when you came along and said, hey, I want to do this. It was like too good to be true, because I always imagined like this could literally be like a movie or a book or something like that. Something very cinematic in the way you're laying it out.
Oh, that's cool. Well, the fourth chapter of Witchworks will be going out in about a week. So we do it every 2 weeks, and we'll have that next chapter, which I think is a bad apple.
Bad apple,
For people that want to figure out, if they want to get a clue, at least if a name gives you a clue or the music inspires you like it inspired me, you can see where you think it might go. But you can check out Mombi's work, mombiuhlman.bandcamp.com, and that's where you can stream the music and purchase it, and maybe get a little copy yourself for while they last of different ones. The different CDs, by the way, do have different, they're made often, they're unique. They have the rope, or they have some connecting thing like the twine that's here, and interesting little things inside, little treasures that kind of go along with that, and the storyline that might be there. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. So cool. Well, that's about what I've got for the evening. As I was telling them about Halloween, I'm kind of moving ahead and wondering where Halloween's going to be. Maybe it'll be a virtual online Halloween party.
Yeah, it's been great.
So it's been a warm up.
Hey, that's not a bad idea. So if you can sit in your costume and tune in, maybe we'll do something like that this year.
Yeah.
Like a whole costume instead of just a wig.
Yeah.
You're the only person I know who puts on a costume and looks more normal.
That's her costume.
Fun fact, I used to wear this wig every day for I don't know, was it a couple years? My husband says a couple of years.
Okay, I hope somebody's over there. And you're
Yeah.
not just okay.
Don't judge. I could be talking to myself.
Or the spirits. You never know.
Yes.
Same thing. So yeah, I'm quite comfortable, and it is a little bit dried out and a little tangled because it's been in a box for 2 years, but yeah, I'm quite comfortable in my beautiful. I call it my Disney princess hair because it's very bouncy. Oh, I have to clip it back, otherwise it's like poof, all in my face.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, the lights are on. So yeah, I think we had a great time. I wanted to thank everybody who came out. You guys, like Elaine and Pam and Tony, everybody who commented, you guys are what makes this work. And we're really excited that David's second collection is coming out and that we got to be a part of that. So I can't wait to see what else you come up with. I've got an inkling of one of your next projects. We've talked about it, and I'm excited, and I hope you're excited, and I hope everybody else gets excited, because if you enjoy these, then you're really going to enjoy what's coming, I think. So hopefully that'll be maybe 2021. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. That's a hopeful plan, but that's things keep happening, but we'll see what happens in that. And there are multiple projects along the way that are kind of dovetailing, so we'll see how that happens.
And definitely want to thank Mommy, man. You got some killer music, and I'm glad you could make it for this.
Thank you.
I've been listening along with everybody else to the Dark Corners second season, and it's a really good partnership, I guess. The music and the stories go really well together, so I'm glad you guys could work that out.
Yeah, I love working with David. He's wonderful. So.
It's a good collaboration. This has really been fun.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, meant to be. Yeah.
Definitely, I think so.
All right, any final words, David?
Yeah, I think that's it. Happy Halloween's what I've got to say. And let's listen to that music and find some scary stories. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, trick or treat.
Yeah,
Happy
trick or
Halloween,
treat.
everybody.
Happy Halloween. See ya.